And he also is the creator of Statamic, which is a flat file-based CMS built in Laravel. Actually, you don't need any database or anything like that. It's a really cool product, so check that out. I'll be honest, I have no idea what this talk is about. He hasn't told me anything. He said when he was first starting on it, his notes included blow up kitty-sized swimming pool and pause for effect. That was how he planned to open the talk. I don't know if that's still happening or not, but here's Jack McDade.
Good morning. Thank you, Adam. My app totally failed, and I'm going to be using a remote. And as I pace around using this for the first time after rehearsing with something else, hopefully it goes well. Wizards, lawnmowers, hovercrafts. I'm Jack McDade. He stole my entire intro, which is fine. I need to turn this on. There we go. You can follow me at Jack McDade on Twitter. If you Google me, though, you'll see, like, this is me, this one here, jackmcdade.com, not this guy down here, the singer, comedian, radio personality. It's probably easy to confuse me with someone who was Dick Clark's very first musical guest on American Bandstand, but that's not me. I tried to hire him to do this talk in place of me, but he didn't get back to me. So this is me, not him, not that one. The music does keep me young. I design and I build stuff, which means I am a designer and a developer. Excuse me if I keep looking at my slides. I think they're really pretty. I did design Laravel, Envoyer, Forge, just the homepage. I'm trying to let him let me do the UI for the inside. Hopefully you guys would encourage that thought. I did the Laracon website. And for a brief moment in time, the Laracast site, I did design work before. Jeffrey redesigned it 65 times since then. He says it's a disease, and so it's not his fault. It's really not. We should give him some sympathy there. I built a CMS called Statamic. It's pretty cool. I'm not going to talk about it today. I have a company called Wilderborn. We're not really going to talk about that, but we design Laravel and Vue apps. It's really just me and Jason Varga right over here. He's a way better developer than me. Don't hire him. I can't afford to live without him. So that's me. I'm going to pace around the stage because I think that's cool when comedians do it, and maybe it'll make me seem funnier. Who has seen Stranger Things? Who's watched this? Yeah, anybody? Okay, that has nothing to do with this talk. I just think it's awesome. Watched it in 2 nights, and I'm not even ashamed at all. I love movies, TV shows. I wanted to go to school for film school, and I didn't do that because I met a woman, and I married her, and that all worked out pretty well. But so instead of going to film school, I'm going to tell you 3 acts. I'm going to have 3 topics, and the first one is on creativity. So raise of hands, who here has ever currently worked, runs a full-service marketing agency? So like designers, creatives, managers, okay. So I started in the full-service marketing agency world, and there's something that I want to talk about, which was kind of affected my early career, and this was the idea of the divide between creatives and technicals. I don't know if your company does this, but when I was there, I was not a creative, and it was challenging for me, who had a lot of creative ideas, because I was a technical person. So I want to basically explain the fact that creativity is not like a category, but creativity is a resource. This is something that we all have. Technical ability is a skill. So if you are in a position where you feel like you're not being listened to creatively, that's okay. I'll talk about maybe how to overcome that. But know that you are creative. My mouth is getting drier quicker than I expected. Do you make things or stuff? Anybody? Does anybody make things or stuff? Websites, web apps, anything? Yes? Okay, so you are creative. You created something. That is basically the definition of creativity. It's basically what our brains doing what they do. That's a scientific fact, which is true. I Googled that. And creativity is a renewable resource. There's always more of it, but it can run dry. And so when you run out of creativity, this is the fuel behind what lets you solve problems, what lets you turn nothing into something. And when you run dry, you can burn out. sometimes leads to depression or YouTube comments. And all of these things are bad. So I'm going to make an analogy. Programming is a lot like story writing, like creative writers. Does anybody like fantasy fiction? Anybody? Fantasy? Okay. I can't read anything else but fantasy. I'm sorry. Anyone who's ever written a Laravel book, I've not read it. I was busy reading Brandon Sanderson, who is one of the most prolific authors in the fantasy genre. I won't say that he is the most, because someone probably knows more than me, and then I'll be wrong, and then this talk won't have any value. So Brandon Sanderson has written a number of really popular fantasy series, and in addition to writing a ton of really popular books, he also teaches writing. So he's an expert, and he mentors and he teaches, and so I look to him as like an authority on creativity. He has a website, writeaboutdragons.com, where he goes through a lot of master level classes, content about writing, and one of the things he does is make people want to get into writing. Okay, so what they ask, what is a good day job to have to get into writing? And he said, and this kind of stuck with me, and this started to unpack some thought process for me. He said that the hardest job to have while being a writer is a programmer, because they flex the same exact muscles. So I like to present the idea that building an application is somewhat like writing a novel. You know where you're going to start, Laravel, new app, right? You know where you're going to end. You have a completed spec full of features. But the middle part is a little bit fuzzy. So you've got your features or your main characters. You've got a lot of stuff you want to do. But authors usually give themselves room to let things happen as they do. And that's why we write object-oriented code. That's why we spend a lot of time trying to make our code flexible and changeable, because we don't know what's going to happen. So I like to present this idea that creativity is your mana. If anybody's another fantasy analogy, what happens when your mana runs dry as a wizard? Does anybody know? You die really fast. I used to play a lot of World of Warcraft in college, and they called the wizards, the mages, the glass cannons. If you have magic, if you have mana, you are this guy. You are a badass wizard casting fire and ice spells, singing songs about them, maybe. But when you, it's a Game of Thrones joke, if you run out of mana, you kind of start to feel like this guy. If you're here, I'm sorry, I Googled for lame-looking wizard. So we kind of want to be this guy. We want to be someone who has mana. We want to maintain some creativity. We don't want to run ourselves dry. And so I want to talk briefly about managing your creative mana pool. This is my analogy. If it doesn't really work that well, I'm sorry, I thought it was fun. And one of the ways that I've found in trying to manage my creativity, and you'll run out, so you want to figure out how to make it last as long as possible before you hit that point where you just need to flip a desk, right? And so I do this with something I call task pairing. You probably can't Google this because I made it up. But it's basically combining things that bleed your creativity with things that don't, or bleed it less. So in that analogy where creativity or programming and writing use the same muscles, when you exercise, sometimes you want to do legs and shoulders, right? Because they're different muscle groups, and you can get more work done. So coding and writing is horrible. You get absolutely no regenerative abilities when you do this, which is why writing documentation sucks. I know. Coding and design, which is something that I do, you definitely get some benefit there. 25%, that's not bad. I can code, and then I can design, and then I have a little bit more ability to code again, and so I do that. Coding and photography, they're you're not even at the computer anymore. Getting better, 75%. Coding and lawn mowing is awesome, by the way. 250%. If you have walking desks, I submit you should have a lawn mowing desk. You got a lot of stuff done. So what you need to do, because it's different for everybody, you need to find things that contrast well for you. So we've probably all read that blog post about the manager time schedule versus the programmer time schedule, right? You want to work in 4-hour blocks. Please don't interrupt me. I've got this skeleton in my head. I've thought about all my code. I know where I'm going. If you tap me on the shoulder, I will kill you. We've all done that. If you need 4-hour block to not kill somebody, maybe you shouldn't be greedy and go for 2 4-hour blocks in one day. Maybe you should get your protective block, and then the other time you should combine that with some other thing. Maybe it's commenting your code, or maybe it's designing if you're like a hybrid person, or switching to front end. And so find things that contrast your day so that you can pace yourself out and not burn out and work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. It doesn't always work, but I found that it helps. So that's managing the expenditure of your creativity. Refilling is different. To refill, you need to completely stop. And so there's 3 things you need to do to let your creativity refill your mana. You need to disengage from what it is you're doing. Leave the computer, step away, change perspectives, just go somewhere else. Go away from the computer, go outside, watch TV, and just re-engage your brain completely in something else. And a couple years ago, I wrote a blog post called Why I Play Video Games. And it was actually got homepage on Hacker News for like an hour and almost crashed my site. But it was running a really old version of Statamic, and it actually stayed up for 10,000 visitors in an hour, which is pretty good for a flat file CMS, right? But I find that if I don't let my brain totally engage in something that's not coding, I will achieve burnout so fast. I don't have time when I come back in the morning from work, or after a long night, and I'm grinding on a problem, and I'm like got my laptop on the couch, and we're watching TV, and I'm not paying attention, and I'm going to bed, and I'm thinking about that problem. In the morning, I wake up and I start shaving yaks. And sometimes the yaks need to be shaved, but it's not every day. And so I submit that you do something completely different than coding, or whatever it is that drains you at the end of the day or at the end of the week. I like to go outside. I like to play video games. Rocket League shout out, anybody? My favorite thing is to play video games about being outside. Everything. That's Uncharted 4. It's like the best game ever made. Naughty Dog shout out. Maybe they'll hire me someday. You gotta allow yourself to escape, right? I could beat this to death, but I'll leave it here. Okay, so we're gonna switch to Act 2. And this is gonna focus on this escaping part, not necessarily to get away from work, but to change perspectives. When you're grinding on a problem and you can't solve it, or it's frustrating, sometimes you just have to do something different. And you feel like you shouldn't, because if I don't get this done, I can't move on. But sometimes you're never gonna get it done, or it's gonna take you 10 times longer if you stay on that problem. And switch, come back later, and you'll find you probably have a lot more creative ability to actually get through that challenge. I'm gonna go back to the writing analogy. And I'll forget my next slide because I don't have my previewer, but cool. A few things inspire change, like perspective. So if you need to change something in your app, if you need to find a way to challenge that problem, just change your perspective. That's basically what I just said. And so with this writing analogy, I look at people like Brandon Sanderson as a master of like creativity and process, and the guy writes a lot of books. So since 2005, Stephen King, who's another prolific author, has written 18 books. You guys might know what I'm about to do here. Since 2005, someone wrote a whole lot less books than that. Any guesses? That too. That's also frustrating, more for me. George R.R. Martin has written 2 books since 2005. He's the Game of Thrones guy, Song of Fire and Ice. Everybody wants the next book, and instead we have to watch the TV show, which is really good. Brandon Sanderson did write 20. He writes more books than Stephen King, but that's okay. And recently, Stephen King and George R. R. Martin were on stage interviewing each other, and I thought this was really relevant to this talk. Okay, so you've got Stephen King here on the left, and he's frustrated by George R. R. Martin because the whole world is, basically. And George says, let me back up here, maybe see, I'm not actually blocking this, right? How the F do you write so many books so fast? To which Stephen King replies, I work 3 to 4 hours every day. I try to get about 6 pages done and get them fairly clean. It's not super ambitious. He's not trying to get a whole chapter done. He's not trying to get to the end in a rough state and go back to the beginning and start cleaning it up. 6 pages every day, which kind of blew George R. R. Martin's mind. And so he responds with this gem. You don't ever have a day when you sit down there and it's like constipation? You write a sentence and then you hate that sentence and then you go check your email and wonder if you had any talent after all and maybe you should have been a plumber? Anybody? Every day, all year? Yeah, I know this feeling really bad. Don't you have days like that? And Stephen King says, no. That was way slower than I expected it to be. So he's got something going there. He's focused. He's working 3 to 4 hours a day. I know it's kind of unrealistic. We really can't do that, especially when you're paid hourly. You have to stay there for 40 hours. I'm not saying that we all should work 4-hour days. But what he's doing with his other time, I'm sure he's working, but he's not sitting in front of his computer, or if he's one of those typewriter guys, he's doing something different. He's consuming content, he's spending time with his family, he's walking around, he's doing something, he's letting his creativity refill. Because for him, the actual thing he has to do at the end of the day is type words. And so we have to do that too. And I think it's a good analogy. So to continue talking about perspective, I'm going to tell a story. I've told the story like 50 times, but never to a group like this before. But back in college, I worked at a small electronics store. It's a national chain. They sell things like transistors and cell phones and satellite dishes. Maybe some of you work there. Does anybody know who I'm referring to? I'm not going to call it, I don't know, let's call it Radio Shack, okay? For the sake of, well, I won't tell you the whole story. Okay, so it's like 2002, 2003. We're working at Radio Shack, and this is a minimum wage job. This is kind of demeaning because you're supposed to, the tagline is, you've got questions, we've got answers. I mean, if there was a company called Radio Shack, that might be a tagline that they would use. And so 21-year-old kids in French blue shirts and khaki pants and shoes with digital watches, and we kind of look the part, and people come in and expect us to know the answers, and we have absolutely no training, and so we didn't really take the job seriously. We just decided to have fun. I mean, we did everything we were supposed to. We didn't do anything illegal, I'm pretty sure. But we goofed off a lot, and one of the reasons we got away with it is because of our manager, and this is the main character of this story. His name, let's call him Jim. His name was Jim, and I don't know, maybe it was. I need to give you the picture of Jim. Picture like a 16-year-old, almost Eagle Scout, right? Like he couldn't quite get all the way there. He's got the haircut, but he's kind of like, I don't know, I can't quite get there. And then you grow him up 30 years and nothing changed. He got a job while he was 17 at Radio Shack, and he never stopped working there. He only ever had one job. He switched stores, but he stayed in the same general area within a 10-mile radius, and after 30 years, he's still working at Radio Shack. And on one hand, that's pretty impressive that he actually stuck with it. But on the other hand, it left a vulnerability that we decided to exploit, and it was a singular, infallible perspective that he had maintained. Radio Shack was the pinnacle of technology. They had everything that was good was at Radio Shack. I know, right? Everything they sold was the best version of something that somebody could sell in that category. And so at one point, Best Buy was coming to town, and he really had a problem with that. Not because he was afraid of business, but he was like, I don't know, they're not going to have good products. They're going to buy stuff at Best Buy, and they're going to waste their money because it's going to break, and they're going to buy iPhones, and who wants an iPhone? We have Nokia 5100s here, and they're fantastic. And so we decided to see how far he really believed that Radio Shack was infallible, and so we created a fake product and decided to see if he would believe it was real. We're talking about the Hovercraft here. This is the Hovercraft part of my title. So what we did, This was really one of the funniest things I've ever done in my entire life. And you won't be able to really appreciate it. But we went through the system and we found a SKU. In the 970 series, if anyone's ever worked at a store like a Radio Shack, you know that these are special order items that are never carried in the store. So we found one with a cryptic title, and we decided we would make a fake web page, because this is what we did. I didn't make any money doing this yet, but at the time, this is honestly one of the things that inspired me to really go full-time into web, and here I am. So we created the NASA-class Phoenix AZ3 Hovercraft. It was awesome. I hope you guys appreciate this next slide, because it probably took longer to find than everything else I've done in preparation, but this is the page I created. Look at this website. This is fantastic. It's $1,149. It's technically a remote control car. It's designed to be sleek, sporty, and intimidating, although much larger than your average RC car. It's the real thing, less expensive than similar products offered by other companies. What products? It's like everybody's selling them. The patented hover coil skirt lifts the vehicle 4 to 6 inches. This is not a pad of air. This is flight, everybody, depending on the weather. And it's available in both 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz, which, depending on your Wi-Fi connection, that may or may not be a good thing. There's no way anybody should believe this was real, but what we did was we made this page, we put it on the demo computer via thumb drive, and we set it up, and in the morning, when it was slow, it's always slow, when it was slow, we called him over, and we're like, hey, Jim, dude, check this out. This is unbelievable. We're selling hovercrafts now. And he comes over, and he's like, really? Like, this is real? And we knew he would do this, and this is why we did it this way. He prints it out and takes the paper, and he walks over to the computer, and he punches in 9701137, and guess what comes up? NASA class AZ3. And he's like, it's real. We've done it. Radio Shack has done it. We have hovercrafts now. Such a glorious moment. But this is where it started to spiral out of control. Because he wanted to buy one. He went over to the computer and he logs into his bank account and he makes sure he has $1,100, which after 30 years at Radio Shack, I'm not sure if he did. And he did. He had been saving diligently, and so he goes to actually order this thing, and we're like, oh no, do we tell him? Do we get fired? What happens? And thank God there was none in stock. Whatever that was, it was a close call. We didn't think to try it. I didn't want to actually, well, I didn't have $1,100 either. So thankfully. So then he gets on the phone with a district manager, and we're like, oh my God. We have hovercrafts, go to this URL, and can I go back? Boom. He reads him the URL over the phone, and he gets a 404. And we're like, oh boy, we're busted. And he goes, we must have gotten an update before you guys. Because that's how the internet works, apparently. Zooming in. And then I remembered, at the back of my mind, the Phoenix is large enough to be ridden by one person under 120 pounds. Whew, he was a big guy. Jim, oh my God, I think this is for kids. It's perfect. It's a great mode of transportation for skinny executives. Close call. And he goes, I could lose weight. You're 6'4", it's not possible. Your bones weigh 120 pounds. So, what was wrong with his perspective? Anybody? It was too narrow. He clung so hard to this perspective that Radio Shack was infallible that he became a fool. And yeah, it seems kind of mean now, but I'm here in the future. That was old me, and it's still funny. We're gonna move on to Act 3. I don't remember how to do analog. I think I'm good. People, product, and process. And I said that backward. People, process, and product. Does anybody watch The Prophet? Anybody? Yes. The Prophet is one of my favorite business shows of all times. Marcus Lemonis comes into failing companies and he decides to save them with the power of his money and smart ideas. It's awesome. If you don't watch it, you should. It's on Hulu. And so he breaks down every company into these 3 categories: people, product, process. I probably put them wrong in my slide. And these are the 3 things he looks at to improve. Where are the problems? Is the problem with the people? Is the product wrong? Do we need to change the product? He likes to have only one of these 3 things wrong, and so he can fix it and make a successful company. He invests his money, etc. So we're going to talk about how creativity and perspective kind of mash up to affect these 3 categories in your business. We're not talking about code necessarily, but hopefully you're mildly entertained and hopefully you learned something here. This is the practical advice part of the talk. People. Always assume there is another side to the story. When you're driving on the road and somebody cuts you off on the highway and you give them the finger, maybe they're on the way to the hospital. I mean, they might not be. They're probably a jerk. But you don't know that. You can't assume that everybody is a bad driver. You can't assume that all of your customers are inept. It's possible that you left something out of the documentation. And if you guys use Statamic, I've done that before, and there's still holes. Every documentation has holes, right? You don't know. Don't be defensive. When somebody is giving you critical feedback, whether it's a customer or a manager, don't be defensive. Listen to everything they have to say, because as soon as you become defensive, you start coming up with arguments for why you're right, instead of thinking about maybe you're wrong, or maybe you just missed something. It doesn't have to be a point of failure. Don't gossip. Gossip is taking a perspective, it's locking it into place, and then sharing it to people in a way that the original person can't defend themselves. You don't know their whole story, don't gossip. Gossip ruins companies. I've been there. It's been horrible. I've hated my life because of a culture of gossip. And I finally quit that job and started my own company. And it was a good thing. And it's me in one room, and so there's really no one to gossip about. So I was also homeschooled, so I have a lot of these jokes, like, I'm going to go have a company reunion right now. Woo! Right? Class reunion at the same time. Treat others how you want to be treated. This is a paraphrase. This is the golden rule. It comes from the Bible, which is kind of full with some pretty good stuff. If everybody did this, I know this is really hard, but if everybody did this, would we have the problems we had today? I don't think so. If everybody's treated well, the way they'd want to be treated, sometimes people want to be treated mean, and you treat them mean and they like it. I mean, that's okay too, I guess. I'm not judging, I'm just saying. And culture change, like good compression technology, can be middle out. And what this means is you don't have to wait for your managers, your company owners, whoever's in charge, the leaders of your company, to change the culture. I'm not saying you can be successful, but you can try. If there's a real problem with that creative technical divide, if you're not being listened to, do something about it. Build a prototype of the thing you tried to show them, tell them. Like, we don't want to use Vue.js, we love jQuery. And you're like, oh my God. Rebuild one page of your app on your own time. With Vue.js, you'll learn something, you'll show them, it's taking initiative. It might do some good. It might not, but it's worth a try. It's better than quitting, you should try something. Process. This creative process, the process of working. This is really important. Failure is an event, not a person. We literally watched Adam fail 65 times in a row yesterday on purpose. Nobody here is a failure. We've all failed. I do it daily. Hopefully this talk isn't a total failure, but you are not a failure. It's just an event. There's something that happens after that. Keep trying. Try again. Change your perspective. Try again. If you're stuck, change your perspective. I literally do this. I move my desk around my office. It's a tiny little room in my house. I put it on this wall, then I move it and I put it on this wall. And then I switch my monitors, and so I look at this way and then look this way. Sometimes it's just enough to make me think differently because I'm not in that same place, that same seat every day. I work from home. I go to the same grocery store. I take different ways every time. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but I do things differently on purpose because it just creates different connections in your mind. When you do the same thing over and 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 over again, the way your brain works, and this is science, by the way, I Googled for this, your brain will collapse similar experiences on top of each other. And so I was homeschooled from the age, from 3rd grade all the way to 12th grade, and I can tell you like 3 things about it. Every day was basically the same. I think I came out okay. We're actually going to homeschool our kids, and I'll probably ruin them. But I don't remember anything. Every day was the same. I did schoolwork in the same room. I didn't have different teachers. I didn't have different rooms. Changing your perspective helps you create new memories. It helps you be more creative. It's a good thing to do that. You didn't do it on purpose. If you can't decide between 2 things, you need to nudge the donkey, which sounds weird, but it's actually a philosophical paradox illustration, which is 3 words I hoped I could say out loud in a row. Success. This is, given a donkey placed equidistant between water and food, who is both starving and extremely thirsty, will die because it can't decide which one. Will die of both thirst and hunger. I don't know if this is actually true, but this is the philosophical concept. And so if you're stuck between, I don't know which design pattern to use, it should be interface or it should be decorator, or if you're stuck between blue or like teal or like light blue, ask someone to nudge your donkey or call it something else. Just have them pick for you. That one, cool. I don't have to decide anymore. And then you remove some decision fatigue and you get to move on. I do this with Jason. I don't call it this. I'm like, I can't decide, tell me. It happens. It works pretty well. I'm sorry too. Be realistic and pace yourself. We looked at the little video thing of Stephen King. He paces himself extremely well. I mean, I'm not sure many people are very capable of doing it to that level, but pace yourself. It's really hard to do that at the tail end of a project. If you're grinding on something right now, don't feel like you can't do this. Do it on the next project. Start out, block your time, do your task pairing, see if that helps. If you start from the beginning and you pace yourself and you're not grinding to midnight and waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and hashtag humble bragging about it, you'll probably find that you're a lot more effective long term. We need to pace ourselves for the long term. And the final section here, product. Present the truth in your product. Don't lie about it in the way that you present your marketing copy. Don't take a screenshot so tiny, you're like, this button looks so good. It's in a pile of garbage, but this button looks really good. Well, maybe you should redesign your app a little bit. I could help you maybe, that's fine. And sometimes that's really hard. So you just have to say what your product does. You just need to be authentic about it. We try to do that with Statamic. I don't think we've ever said it was the best CMS ever made, but it's pretty good. Avoid superlatives and hyperbole. 2 words I know I can say because I love them and I talk about them a lot. My wife's like, oh, you're going to talk about superlatives, aren't you? I'm like, yes, I am. They're literally the worst thing ever. It's also hyperbole. If you don't know what hyperbole is, it's gross exaggeration. It's kind of a default state when we're describing something because we all have a sense of humor. We're all creative. We just don't exactly know how to express it, or sometimes your first attempt is not always the best one. And so this is, if you don't know what hyperbole is, let me give you an example. Here's our homepage with hyperbole. The most powerful CMS ever made. You can't possibly live without it. Buy it now or regret it for the rest of your life. It might be true. It's not. You will live. There will be new CMSs. Statamic will die one day. Laravel won't be here. Well, Laravel may be here. It's pretty awesome. Without hyperbole, build simply. It's the flat file CMS built for developers and clients. You can't tell me that's not true, right? You might not think it's as good for clients, but you can't say we didn't build it for clients. As soon as you say something about your product that somebody can empirically say is false, you're lying. You can't have the best product. It might be the best product in a niche. Maybe you could say that. You might have the fastest product because of a benchmark. But be careful how you word that. Make it true, and that authenticity will come through in your product. And finally, actually use your product like a customer. This is sometimes hard to do because it's annoying to go through your sign-up process of your SaaS app, and then you have no account data, and it's a lot of work. In our case, we have a CMS. We like to build little websites. Sometimes we'll do something for somebody, or we'll buy a theme off ThemeForce, and we'll integrate it, because when you do that, you realize, oh, it's really hard to turn a list into 3 columns and to do this thing, and there's template language doesn't let you do this or that or whatever. And so when you use your product like a customer, you can look at it from their perspective, and because of that, you might see that you need to make some changes. The too long didn't read version, if I didn't have your attention, I'm just going to go through this real quick. Be kind. Tell the truth. Look for new perspectives. And that's not me. Thank you. Any questions? It's not really, this is a soft talk. I really don't know if there are any questions, but we have 2-3 minutes maybe if anybody has a question. It's okay if you don't. What's that? Absolutely. Yeah, I'll also give you links for the video if you want to watch the Stephen King video, and Burian's ass is the name of that donkey nudging analogy. So I'll put links at the final slide on that. Yeah. Anything else?
Is Jim still at Radio Shack?
I don't know who Jim or what Radio Shack is. These are hypothetical people in companies, so I have no idea. But I'm probably going to Google for him later. Anything else? Cool. All right, I think we have a break now.